your MC. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands that we are zooming in from today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm on the land of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and it would be great if you could share with us as well in the chat which land you're calling in from, because no matter where we are in this country, we are on stolen land. This is, always was, and always will be Aboriginal land. And I do this acknowledgement in full recognition of the fact that we are still far away from justice for First Nations people. So as we strive for equality and justice, First Nations people and their voices must be front and center of this struggle, because there can be no social or environmental justice without racial justice, and there can be no racial justice without First Nations justice. So a very warm welcome to you all to the launch of the Greens campaign for the City of Sydney and the launch of our wonderful lead candidate, Sylvie Ellsmore. This is a public event, and I do thank Greens members, supporters, local residents, and community groups for joining us all today. This afternoon, you'll meet Sylvie, you'll hear from Greens MPs and councillors, and Greens supporters and members as well. So we launch our Greens vision and key policies. We'll talk about why it's so important to put Greens back on the City of Sydney Council and how you can help do this. And we will have time, as Jay said, for a Q&A later too. Under the current circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, I must say it does feel a bit inadequate to say that I hope you're okay. But I do sincerely hope that you are being kind to yourselves and staying safe. Over the last 18 months or so, we've heard many times, over and over, how COVID-19 has revealed and exacerbated existing inequalities. More clearly than ever, we've seen the vulnerability of millions of precarious and casual workers who live without a safety net. Our messed up housing system has left so many struggling to keep a roof over their heads, while the inequality between this arbitrary division between temporary and permanent Australian residents has also been laid bare. But we have also seen some of the changes that we've fought for years, made with a simple stroke of a pen, like raising New Start, basic income for all, free childcare, and a ban on evictions, to name just a few. So this time has also shown us the power of principled campaigning and leading with vision and purpose. So many people have since reached out to tell me that what they once thought as Greens pie in the sky ideas coming to fruition have really made them reconsider the value of being bold and of pushing boundaries. So, we can make the impossible possible. Our challenge now is to make sure that as we emerge from the pandemic, and we will, we do so by making fundamental and permanent changes to the systems that sustain these very problems that we've had for decades. We must reclaim the planet-saving, life-making potential of our society, wrested away from corporations and captured governments. But to do this, we know we need to build our movement both in depth and breadth. And that means forging people with disability, women, people of color, and students. Movement building comes from local solidarity by creating local communities of action. And that's where local governments have such a huge role to play. And Greens on council around New South Wales have shown how they represent their communities, from local issues such as building footpaths and cycleways to the biggest challenges like declaring climate emergencies. So in a minute, I'll introduce our first speaker, who will have a lot more to say about the role Greens play on council. But before we do that, I'll hand back to Jay to take a quick photo. So over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Mehreen. And all right, so just as I mentioned before when we started up, if you would if you'd like to be excluded from the photo, just turn your video off now. So I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. and I'll just let you know when I'm about to take the photo. So just bear with me one moment and I'll get that sorted. All right. All right, thank you everyone. I've just taken photos of everyone who wanted to be included in that photo. So now that we've got that little bit of housekeeping
Jay, can you do one more so we get a heads up that you're actually taking the photo? Because I thought we were waiting for the tech.
All right. Oh, my
Thanks,
apologies. Darling. All right. So here we go. I'm going to take it in 3, 2, 1. So you get another one. Done. Next page. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Great. All right. Now there you go. Now it's done.
Thanks, Jay.
No worries. I'll pass it back.
It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce Jamie Parker, Greens member for Balmain and former mayor of Leichhardt Council. And as you know, part of Leichhardt Council is now in the city of Sydney. Jamie entered the history books as the first Greens MP elected to the New South Wales Lower House in 2011. And can I say, what a wonderful colleague Jamie was in my 5 years in the Legislative Council while serving and representing you. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to start as well by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting on today, all across Sydney, I expect, and throughout New South Wales. There's some people all around our state. I'm on the land of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and emerging. This land was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you for that introduction. And as you know, I'm the member for the seat of Balmain, and my electorate covers part of the city of Sydney, Glebe, Forest Lodge, Ultimo, and a small part of Pyrmont. And as was mentioned, I was elected to the state parliament in 2011, but before that, I served for 12 years on Leichhardt Council as a councillor and as a mayor, and I know just how important local council is in shaping our community. And that's why I'm here today to support the Greens for the City of Sydney, to support Sylvie as the lead candidate, to make sure that we get Greens on this council, because what the City of Sydney does matters. It matters to our local community, but it can also help set the agenda for our state as well as our country. Locally, of course, our city, we're facing enormous challenges, especially during COVID. How do we build an inclusive and, really importantly, an affordable city? How do we help local businesses thrive? How do we promote biodiversity in an urban setting and not just be the local or even the state leader on climate action, but an international leader? So the actions of the City of Sydney, Australia's global city, can and does inspire other cities to act. We can champion the actions and policies that state and federal government should be taking up. And that's another reason why it's so important Greens are on the City of Sydney. And we've got a proven history of making a huge difference on councils in New South Wales. And we want to take that up again here in the city. We successfully build more open and democratic councils. We take the initiative on climate change, importantly on housing policy and the environment. And most importantly, we build movements and we build campaigns around a broad range of issues, but more often supporting and backing people who are often unheard. Just this year in Glebe, the New South Wales government proposed to redevelop a huge area of public housing, but make that public land 70% to be sold off to the private sector and only leave a meager 30% for public housing. We say public land should be used for public purposes. Now, under a Liberal state and federal government, it might seem like a utopian goal, but it was our goal. And we worked with key groups in our community like Hands Off Glebe and groups like the Glebe Society, and Sylvie was there. She was with the community on the ground, speaking at a rally, helping build the broad campaign that we needed to win. And just a few months ago, the government buckled under that pressure and we won. The government announced that entire redevelopment would be 100% social housing, more housing critically needed for those in our community who are pushed out of the rental market, pushed out of the private market. Now, that's what Sylvie helped achieve as an activist. And that's what her life's work has been dedicated to, working, supporting, nourishing, and building communities. And I know that her contribution would be so much more amplified as a councillor on the City of Sydney. So with Sylvie as the lead candidate, and we have an excellent ticket, DJ, who's second on the ticket, we can make a real change. She's a former councillor from Marrickville Council, so she has the experience to hit the ground running when she's elected. But of course, we need you to make this happen. We're not powered by developers. We're not powered by corporate donations. We're powered by ideas, passion, and people just like you. So I encourage you to get onto Sylvie's social media, share her messages, amplify her voice, and importantly, make a donation. You can see in the chat where we'll drop in a link where you can make a donation, no matter how big or small. Because last election, we were within just 500 votes of winning a seat on the City Council. So your contribution can take us over that tipping point. So thank you all so much for coming here today. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you virtually and hopefully in person on the campaign trail. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jamie. And now we'll be handing it over to Sylvie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Sylvie Ellsmore, and I'm very proud to be the Greens lead candidate for the City of Sydney Council in these upcoming county council elections. Particularly in these lockdown times, we would have loved to have been together face to face, but I still really appreciate the opportunity to connect, and for us to, we have to keep talking in whatever way we can about the kind of communities that we want to build and how we do that together. And I hope that today is part of that opportunity. My role today is to formally launch our campaign and also share with you some of the specific ideas that members and volunteers have been developing about the sorts of things that we could achieve on City of Sydney Council, particularly to address the crises that we face in terms of climate change and inequality. But before I begin, as a matter of protocol and as a mark of respect, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm also speaking to you from Gadigal land, country on which I was born and have been lucky to live my whole life. Aboriginal country for which sovereignty was never ceded. And I thank Mehreen for reminding us all that when we do an acknowledgement of country as a protocol at the start of speaking events, it's a reminder to all of us that there will never be justice in our communities until there's justice for our First Nations brothers and sisters, and that our role is to walk actively in solidarity. And it has to be part of all of our movements and all of our work, whatever we do. So a bit about me. I know a lot of you. I've worked with a lot of you for a long time, and it's very lovely to see so many friendly faces. But for those of you that don't know me, I live in Darlington with my partner and my flatmates and my 2 dogs. I grew up in Glebe. I lived in Newtown, where I represented the Greens as a local councillor on Marrickville Council, as Jamie said, and I work at the University of Sydney. This city, and particularly the inner city, has been my community my whole life. And I've learned so much from the opportunity to work alongside residents and community groups here and from across the country, being part of communities that stand up for each other, that stand up for people whose voices are being pushed out, shut down, not acknowledged, and that stand up to influence and corruption from big interests and big money. And that we're here today to talk about how the Greens can do that and will do that on the City of Sydney Council, to share our vision for a city for everyone, for environmental and climate justice, and for a grassroots and democratic city. For me, I've been lucky to work for the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, winning protections for cultural heritage, as a native title lawyer, winning protection of national parks and important lands and waters. When my partner Ben and I first moved to Darlington when we were students going to the university, we helped establish Red Watch as a residents' action group, and I'm on the coordinating committee today. I'm a board member on the Inner City Voice in Waterloo, and I teach karate at Jinseru Karate Do in Darlington. And thank you to some of my kohai who I see on the call today. I'm part of the Greens because the Greens represent the values of our community and my values, and are willing to stand up for them on the streets and in places where we're represented in council and in Parliament. The Greens have a vision for Sydney and a vision for local council that I share, which is about more than just council looking after roads, rates and rubbish. recognise that council's role is to work in partnership with the community and to build and grow our collective commons, our green spaces, affordable housing, public services like childcare. One of my proudest achievements with the Greens team on Marrickville Council was when we finally won the construction of the beautiful new Marrickville Library and affordable housing, new public housing owned by the council, the largest public project in the council's history. Unfortunately, even in the face of amalgamations, it will be the last and biggest project in the council's history. And it was won as a result of decades of community campaigning and the Greens on council making sure that the vision that the community had, the design that it selected was not watered down, was not pushed back, and was finally delivered as this beautiful award-winning community space. For the City of Sydney, this last term has been the first time we haven't had a Green on the council. We've always had one or two representatives. We've had the deputy mayoralty role twice. We've played a strong role supporting action on climate change and driving that agenda when it wasn't nearly as popular as it is now. For us, for the city, and the City of Sydney acknowledges we're in a climate emergency, as we all do, and we need to be talking about strategies that move us forward, that involve the whole community, that involve renters who are half of our local community, to ensure that ambitious targets that are met, things like biodiversity, urban tree canopy, are actually delivered and not just reset. And if the COVID pandemic has taught us anything, it is that we need strong, publicly controlled services if we are going to address the climate and all the other crises that we face. That includes our waste services, responsible for some of the largest footprint from residents, and other essential services that council has been outsourcing, and we want to bring them back in-house. One of the 4 pillars of the Greens is grassroots democracy. We believe that councils should be sharing decision-making with local residents. It's not just about consultation. It's about how do you ensure that residents have a real seat at the table about the decisions that affect their lives. For our city, we hear often that Sydney is more of a council that has moved to top down, where it's harder and harder to get access to public spaces for free. It's harder and harder to hire local council halls. It's harder to get council support for new ideas. Residents need to be acknowledged as partners in finding the solutions to the problems we have. The seat at the table means no more closed doors meetings with state governments about these big new developments, which residents hear about after negotiations have already been had about concessions the council thinks are in everyone's interests. We need to move beyond a model of consultation to one which sees residents as part of the solution and as partners, and genuinely shares power and shares decision making. That's what the Greens want to bring on the City of Sydney Council. And what we're going to do today is also, just in a minute, I want to share with you a big initiative that we have about affordable housing in the city, because the city also recognises that we are in an inequality crisis, an affordable housing crisis. The inequality in housing is what the single biggest thing that is driving the gap between rich and poor in our city. But the urgency and scale of the crisis is not being matched by a level of action by council, and we think the City of Sydney Council needs to step up. It's not just a job that needs to be left to the market, to the state government or to the federal government. Local councils have an incredibly important role, and they can do more, particularly a council like the City of Sydney, which is one of the richest in the country. Before I do that though, I realise I've been speaking for a while. We wanted to share some voices with you from other people in the campaign. Normally, if we were having a face-to-face event, we would have lots of people come up. You'd be able to meet some of the other people who are volunteering on the campaign, developing our campaign platform, community groups we've been working with. We're not able to do that today, but what we asked people to do was to take a video for themselves while we're in lockdown and share it with our campaign team so that we could package it up and share it with you, talking about what they hoped for their city. So I'm hoping that the tech works and that we could share this video, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to launch the official housing initiative that we're very excited to release today. So over to you, Jay or Andrew. I hope that this works. And I also wanted to give a shout out our second candidate, DJ Tobarek, who's featured in the video. DJ is a long-term Darlinghurst resident, strong connections to the community, and proud to have number 2 on our ticket.
Hi. Hi, my name is Seb.
Hi, I'm Chetan.
Hello, I'm Maggie Hayes.
My name's Molly.
Hi, my name is DJ Tabori.
Hello, I'm Clive.
I'm Rachel Jacobs. I'm an arts worker.
I'm a business owner here in the city of Sydney.
I've been living in Darlinghurst for all my adult life.
I live in Newtown.
I'm a renter in Waterloo.
I live in Gadigal country.
I live in Forest Lodge with my 10-month-old baby and partner.
I care about Sydney and I want a more just and fair city.
Over the last few years, it's gotten harder and harder for people to live in the city of Sydney. More unaffordable and less equitable.
I want a city where people can live together.
I don't want to live in a city that's only for the rich.
It doesn't have to be this way.
I'll be voting Green in the council elections this year because I want a progressive voice on council.
I'd like to see a greener, calmer, cooler city that's more inclusive for everyone.
It's important to me that the council pushes for more affordable housing so the young teacher or nurse or police person can have the same opportunity that I had.
I believe we need someone on council who will stand up for social justice.
I believe we need a Green on local council to work with our state and federal representatives.
I can't wait to see the City of Sydney injected in new green energy, which will result in a much more creative city for all of us.
I'm going to be voting Green.
So that we can have a diverse, inclusive and environmentally sustainable community.
The Greens stand up for real action on climate change and understand how important council's role is in making that happen.
In the City of Sydney, there's so much wealth and power, and that's why we need someone who's going to fight for the rights of ordinary people and disadvantaged communities.
I'm supporting Sylvie Ellsmore because, like me, she believes in a creative, dynamic, exciting and artistic city. And she believes that supporting artists and supporting new artists to create new works is one of the best ways to achieve this.
I'll be voting number 1 Greens in the upcoming council elections
on the 4th of September.
So I'll be voting for the Greens in council and for Sylvie Ellsmore for mayor.
So I'd like to invite you to join our campaign and make the City of Sydney green.
Authorised by Sylvia Haddock for the Greens, New South Wales.
Oh, it's so lovely. Thank you, everyone, and everyone who went through the willing to record themselves at home and share the video with us, and Kath for cutting that beautiful video together. That was very wonderful. Some of the people that are supporting the campaign. So the last thing I would keen to launch today is our housing co-investment fund. So for the Greens, we understand that housing is a human right. Everyone should have access to a home that is safe, secure, and genuinely affordable. And when we talk about the housing and affordability crisis, we know that Sydney is one of the least affordable cities in the world. If you're a local resident like me, this week you would have got the latest glossy newsletter from the council explaining all the wonderful things that council has done for affordable housing over the last 15 years. Direct investment in 423 affordable homes, council providing grants and public land for other people to build housing that's affordable, and more than 1,000 new affordable homes. If you talk about those big mandated developments like in Green Square. Previous Greens on City of Sydney Council have always pushed for more affordable housing. It's why we have some of these achievements, to force developers to at least consider some affordable housing in new builds, despite state government laws making it incredibly difficult to impose that. Every one of those homes that council has helped deliver is incredibly important, particularly for the person who lives in it. But we have had a decade of a housing boom, massive growth in our city, massive growth in the number of people that live in our city, and that current council plans have barely made a dent. If we are going to have a council that is a genuine leader in affordable housing, then we need to do things radically differently. If we look at other cities around the world, like London and Paris, it is the norm for a fifth, 20% of housing to be council publicly owned housing. In London, for example, 2019, 37% of the new homes that were approved were affordable. We're talking about trying to mandate 2-3% here in city for certain developments. And what we should be comparing ourselves are to cities like London, 37%. Our proposal is for a housing co-investment fund, which would see council start to directly invest in housing. in order to grow the number of genuinely affordable permanent homes in the City of Sydney by 2,000 over the next 4 years. City of Sydney Council is a very wealthy council. It has hundreds of millions of dollars in what are currently low yield financial investments, basically invested with the 4 big banks, not really making any money. That's not including the billions in terms of the assets and property portfolio that the city has. We've identified through our modelling and some work we've been doing with some political economists and academics at the University of Sydney, that if council was to shift just some of those millions, 200 million of it, say 660 million that it's got in the bank at the moment, and directly invest it with the community in community-run projects, it could deliver more affordable housing in the next 4 years, in the next term alone, than it has in the last 15 years. By investing directly in communities, council could also, instead of, say, giving grants, which are hard, which obviously reduce the council's bottom line, investments where the council makes its money back mean that we're actually creating a sustainable fund, which council can then use to invest in even more affordable housing. We're talking about a flexible model, council working with local residents groups, Aboriginal organisations, student groups, artists collectives, older people who don't own their own home, community housing providers, or it could build the public housing itself. Our financial modelling shows that it would be possible for council to do this right now. All it needs to do is to do things differently with its money. Council would be like a long-term not-for-profit investor that would support the community, those people being squeezed out of the city to stay here, and support them to stay in the way they wanted to stay, diverse kinds of models of housing that are not just the ones that we've seen now. And as I said, because it's investment, council would make its money back from people being able to pay affordable rents, lower amounts, actually live in an affordable way. The community would win and council would win. We've got a specific, much more detail in the package that we had hoped the website would be ready for us to release today, but we'll be doing it next week, which talks about some of the way you could set up such a fund to make sure that it was tenant-led, that it was sustainable, that it was long-term, and it was genuinely affordable. So you also mean that some of the figures that you see hidden in that idea of developer-delivered affordable housing are things like low market rents that are not really affordable for anybody to live in. And they're not necessarily long-term. They're maybe only for 10 years, and then they go back to the private market. Those are some of the models we have right now that council is relying on that have failed to deliver affordable housing. And there are models that we know have worked that exist in our community like right now that look like this. Stucco, for example, built in the 80s with the support of 2 other big public institutions, the state government at the time and the University of Sydney. It was a student cooperative that has paid itself off years ago. Students currently pay $105 a week rent to live in it. And it's actually making the University of Sydney money. It's making a profit, which should be invested in building more cooperatives. A few years ago, having that kind of community-led sustainable initiative also means that you can do more interesting things. Stucco a few years ago became the largest project to install solar of any apartment complex in Australia, or I think it was the Southern Hemisphere. So Stucco now is also a mini power plant, which means that it's exporting energy to the grid and making it even more affordable for the students who live there by cutting energy bills. These are the sorts of things that we know will work, and all it takes is the will of council to do something differently, to directly invest in communities and to play this kind of leadership role. The City of Sydney, as a world leader and as a wealthy council, is in a position to do it. It's one of the ideas that we're going to be pushing hard this election about council, to try and hold council to account. If you acknowledge that the crisis exists, you've got to put your money where your mouth is to make it happen. Council needs to step up, and we will make sure that they do that. Over the next couple of weeks, as I said, we'll be launching more of these initiatives. We hope to have our lovely website, which is nearly finished, launched next week. We've got a great number of other policies and proposals on there that have been developed by members, and a big shout out to some of our members and volunteers like Caroline, who've been helping us lead that work. I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you. And I'm also looking forward to answering some questions at the end about that. I know I've threw a lot of facts and figures at you guys, but I'm really excited about the potential that we have on council, the potential that Greens can bring to say, let's not do business as usual and let's make a real change. Thank you. I think I'm switching back to Jenny or Jay or Mehreen, or perhaps I was supposed to more smoothly hand over at this point.
It's Jenny's turn now.
I can make that really not very smooth transition smoother, Sylvie, by being more awkward about not finding my mute button. Thank you so much. Can I encourage you all for a second to take your video, to take your sound off mute so we can give Sylvie a real world clap and she can hear the sound. Thank you. Okay, going to mute again, thank you, because it really stuffs with the sound for everyone else that's trying to listen, not on this Zoom. Thank you all for being here. I would like to acknowledge that I am coming from my house in the electorate of Newtown. The electorate of Newtown is on Gadigal land, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Acknowledge that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I would also I guess as Mehreen and Sylvie and Jamie have all said, acknowledge that when we make an acknowledgement, it isn't just a matter of protocol. And I wanted to give a shout out to so many of the Aboriginal community groups and activists and warriors and leaders that consistently check me and make sure that I am checked of how much of a priority I'm giving to the issues of injustice facing First Nations people. And I think that all of us constantly need that reminder, and I just want to thank them for doing that, and just saying that in the last couple of days our office has made a recommitment to make sure that there are priorities around what we're going to be doing when we return to Parliament to raise the ongoing injustice of deaths in custody, but also to reach out more to see what we can do on a practical level to support some of the Aboriginal activist groups that are continuing the struggle for justice in our community. I know that if Sylvie was elected to council, that she would also add that as a huge priority, and making sure that there was always voices and people at the table making decisions and being part of the decisions that are made that affect community. It is, look, let's be frank, it's a bit shit to be on Zoom, isn't it? Like, I'd much rather be in Glebe, at Glebe Town Hall or Redfern Town Hall, wherever the amazing volunteers that had booked this launch had sussed out all these beautiful venues and found the perfect one. I'd rather be afterwards going to a local pub and chatting to you all and seeing you in person. I'd love to be giving Sylvie a hug and saying, isn't this going to be great? We're going to get you elected to council. None of that is happening right now. Instead, we're like staring at a screen. But that is where we're at. And if there is one thing that this current crisis has shown us, is that when we deal with these kind of crises, if we don't have an equal society before, the level of inequality, the level of risk to people that are at the most vulnerable are the ones that slip through the cracks and that are more in crisis and are more in trouble. And so if we ever needed a reason for right now why we need more Greens representation in our inner city community, it's because of that. It's because we face two massive challenges. We face the challenge of inequality and we face the challenge of the climate crisis. Now, Sylvie articulated beautifully the fact that right now we have a relatively progressive council that's doing some great stuff, you know? They're doing some stuff that's not so great, but what they're not doing is pushing the boundaries to the edge. And what the Greens do when we are elected, what the Greens have historically done as a party for decades, is to push the boundaries. Before I was elected in the seat of Newtown in 2014, a year before the election, we sat down as members and members inputted into a plan to say that we need to push for renters' rights. We need renters to be remembered when people talk about housing issues in our state. And we decided to put it on the agenda. Just today, Sylvie announcing this initiative on how the council can co-invest with community to deliver real affordable housing for people in our inner city community is that moment now. The way it gets delivered, the way that you get, and I would remind people that 2 days ago, in the middle of this pandemic, the Treasurer, a Liberal Treasurer in New South Wales, made a commitment that there would be no evictions to renters as a result of this pandemic. There is no way he would have been remembering renters had it not been for the advocacy and the campaigning of tenants' organisations, of tenants and renters, and of the Greens pushing that agenda for years and years and years. And so what we know now is the initiative that Sylvie announced just then is something that if we get Sylvie elected to council, which I feel confident we are going to do, because there are a lot of good people on here that know how to campaign, that we will be able to push that same agenda. And so in 2 years, in 3 years, we will see not just this as an initiative and a launch, but actually as a real world change that will happen. And we'll be seeing hundreds of millions of dollars invested in affordable housing in our city to solve the housing crisis, because that's what the Greens do. We have the ideas that people say are wacky and a bit out there and a bit too controversial. And then years later, whether it be climate change, decriminalisation of abortion, and I acknowledge Mehreen was the one that stood up and pushed that initially in the parliament, that's when we make change happen. We say that we want enthusiastic consent, and eventually they all catch up and they deliver. We talk about dying with dignity, and years later they do that. We talk about climate change back in the days when Bob Brown was the leader of the Australian Greens, and everyone's like, oh, he's a bit wacky. He just wants to make you all go vegetarian as some answer to the climate crisis. And then now what do we see? We see everyone, massive corporations shifting to 100% renewables, pushing the agenda forward to make sure that we're dealing with the climate crisis. So why does it matter on this City of Sydney Council election? Well, I can tell you one thing that really matters. Mehreen and Jamie and I are missing something. Mehreen has got the city community covered at a federal level. Jamie and I have got the city community covered at a state level, but we have not got a friend on local council as a Green that is there to deliver for our community locally. And when we look at issues of housing, when we look at issues of inequality, when we look at issues of climate crisis, we need to remember that if we don't have all those three levels cooked in, the level of our coordination with movements and campaigning can't happen. So I want to end on this. We only are going to make this happen and get Sylvie elected to council if we, as Greens volunteers, as supporters, as people that care about the injustice and inequality in our community, really step up for the next 7 weeks. Because usually, right now, we'd all be together. We would all be going for a door knock afterwards and chatting to hundreds of people. We would have been at street stalls this morning. None of that can happen at the moment. So the only thing we can do to be able to deliver on this is to rely on all of you guys. So what does that mean? That means that we have to do what we do best as Greens. It means that we have to rely on our connections and our networks and talk to people about why we are giving up our time, why we want to sacrifice our time on a Tuesday night or a Saturday afternoon to be able to come to a launch, join a phone bank, to be able to donate money, to be able to donate time, to be able to talk to people about politics, because we want to change the world. Because actually, we only do that if we get people into positions of power that make sure they bring the community voice to the table. And Sylvie can do that. Sylvie has a track record of doing that on Marrickville Council. I have campaigned and been a friend of Sylvie's for over 20 years. I could not think of a person that I would more rather vote for in the City of Sydney Council election than Sylvie Ellsmore. And so I am asking you to do everything that you can to add to the strength of the Greens in the inner city by electing Sylvie Ellsmore as our candidate and then soon to be councillor on the Greens City of Sydney Council. Thank you so much, and I look forward to chatting with you more about how you can help.
All right, thanks Jenny, and thanks to the other MPs, Senator Mehreen Faruqi and Jamie Parker, and of course Sylvie for coming and chatting today. So just to begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I am today, which is Wurundjeri country, which down in Victoria. But most importantly, I'd like to acknowledge the people, First Nations people of the Gadigal country of Eora Nation, for elders past and present. And yeah, it is always important to acknowledge of where we are and the benefits that we have from the lands in which we inhabit today. So just a bit of background for myself. I'm Jay and I'm the campaign organizer for the City of Sydney election. I started up a few weeks ago, and I've been getting around and slowly beginning to meet everyone who's been involved in the City of Sydney campaign. So just some of my experience in campaigning has been in lockdown. So For the Victorian local council elections in 2020, I was one of the organisers on the Moreland campaign. So we had our first meeting just before lockdown. Our second meeting was on Zoom. And then from there on, all of our campaign meetings, we met via Zoom. We organised via Zoom and we shared ideas with the other campaign teams around Victoria about how we could fundraise and engage people online and under the strict lockdown conditions. The most important part of that campaign is essentially, especially under the lockdown conditions, is ensuring that we had enough money to be able to buy the materials that we needed to get out and, to spend on other things that we wouldn't ordinarily have to rely on. So whether that was through additional advertising through social media or whether it was through mail out of the election materials. It is a bit different in Victoria. We had to get to letterboxes, didn't really have booths, but some of the priorities are now shifting for the City of Sydney elections. So, so do our priorities. So as you're all aware, we don't take donations from large businesses or millionaires or billionaires. Greens campaigns are run by the members and supported by the community. So it is important that you can give whatever you can to make sure we get those 500 votes in September and we get Greens back on the Sydney Council. We'll share some ideas with one another shortly about how we can engage better with the community under lockdown. And we also want to hear from you about some of the ways that we can reach the community through the digital sphere in a meaningful way. So one of the best ways that we can engage with people at the moment is to get them through social media and to like and share the content with their immediate circles. And you'll be able to find the link for Sylvie's Facebook and Twitter in the chat. So what we're planning to do is to organize a private group chat where we'll be able to share any kind of content for the City of Sydney elections, which you'll be able to then, like and share with your local communities. And the best way to get in touch with me to get involved in that is through the email, which I'm just going to paste into the chat for you right now. So there's the donate link, and here is the email. So this email here is how you get in touch with the campaign and how you can stay up to date and included in all the campaign. So as you know, we've been running the hashtag City for Everyone. So please share that and get involved in that. So just to finish up, it's not about, it's not about us being in this together through a lockdown, but it's how we can get through this together. And that is why we need you on our side, sharing your brilliant ideas to make sure that we can have a Green on Council, to implement brilliant housing initiative, which has just been announced today, a principled person who takes action against climate change, and most importantly, someone who will make sure that Sydney is a city for everyone. So next week, you'll be able to see all of this on the website and some wonderful graphics that we'll also have lined up. And you'll be able to share those with your friends and families. So stay tuned and watch this space. This is just the launch, and we've got a few more weeks to go, and they're going to be long. So we hope that you can come along and join us to get us back on Sydney Council. So thank you. So now I'm going to take the time to share a poll with everyone. So when I share this, I want to see some thumbs across your beautiful faces. So you should be seeing that now. So I'm going to leave it up there for a minute. Wonderful. And I want you to fill it out. It's multiple choice, so you can throw in more than one. These are just some ideas that that I came up with today for things that we can do to engage people and get involved and share our materials. But if there's something missing there,
hey
please,
Jay,
yeah.
You're sharing the poll results, not the poll questions. Okay, we're good now. All right, amazing, cool.
Relaunch. Hang on. There we go. So how's that? It's live. All right. So yeah, anything that isn't on there, please share it in the chat. These are just a few ideas, but this is not an idea that you've had. It's not an idea that you've tried before. So please enter it into the chat and we can have a look. So we'll leave that up for just another minute and then we can go on from there.
I'm just letting everybody know that I just logged on and made a donation. I appreciate not everybody has parliamentary salaries to my size, but you can make a donation large or small. Right now, Jay can put the link in the chat. No need to wait till after the event's over. You can just whip out your card, stop scrolling on whatever you're scrolling right now and make a donation to support this campaign. That is a possibility if you want to just do immediate action right now to help get Sylvie Ellsmore and the Greens elected to City of Sydney Council.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. And also thank you to everyone who's come in the poll. We've got 75% in so far and we're just over that minute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop that poll and then I'm going to share the results with everyone. So you've got about 30 more seconds to get in if you have not done the poll yet. So I'm going to give you a bit of a countdown and we're going to wind this poll up, you know? All right, let's do that. All right, here are the results for everyone to see. All right, can everyone see those results? Can I see some thumbs? Yay, all right. So there we go. These are just some ideas, as I mentioned before, but please throw it into the chat what you think is a good idea, because at the end of the day, the only people who are going to be able to get us across the line in this campaign are the members and the supporters of people who live in the community. So your ideas are valuable and important to us. So please donate, and also please get in touch with me and the campaign team via email to see how you can get involved and also to share your ideas with us.
Great stuff, Jay.
All right, thank you.
I'm just having a look. There's a couple of other ideas in the chat, which I thought it's useful to chat about. Shall I read you a few out?
Yeah, go for it, please.
Cool. So one suggestion was to have QR codes for the how to vote so that people can get the how to vote easily if they're not there, which I think is really good. I reckon that's particularly going to be important. I think, Dee, that was your suggestion. Crucial if people are feeling a bit nervous about not wanting to take how to votes and all of that, being able to have the QR code version is so good. Deb is asking for an Instagram account for Sylvie. She absolutely does have one, and maybe someone can put one in the chat, put another link in the chat. I put it in earlier so that you can do that. That is indeed true, Nick. We do certainly know how to use QR codes now. That is a skill we have all developed. Someone is asking how we donate. There is a donate link there, but there's no harm ever in sharing a donate link again. Maybe just when you share it, you can say donate here and then put the link in so it's clear. There you go, Jamie Parker, always one for a donate link. Thank you very much, sir. And someone's going to put an Instagram for Sylvie in the chat, I think, as well. Jay, you've been holding online phone banks already, yeah? And it's been going good.
Sure have. We've been calling around and getting people trying to sign up for voting booths on election day. As far as we know, they're still going ahead. So we're going to be pushing phone banks a lot harder as the weeks go by, particularly as we can kind of hopefully get out there in some capacity to volunteer and engage with the community directly. But most importantly, we're going to have to be relying on phone banks to engage with voters as well. So we'll be looking to set those up on, twice, thrice a week over the coming weeks. So please, again, if you want to get involved, there's the volunteer links, and but most importantly, get in touch with the campaign directly at the email in there, sydney.council@newsouthwales.greens.org.au. And there you can reach me, and we can also reach other people who are involved directly in the campaign. So please get in touch and we'll be able to sort that out for you. So I think we're about time and we can kind of move on to our next. So thank you, Jenny, for walking us through that as well.
That's great. I just wanted to do one more thing is, as you're doing these things, I encourage you all, because I can see you all madly typing and doing things while Jay is chatting. As you're doing your things, you should tell us in the chat what you've just done. I've just followed Sylvie's page. I've just donated, because that would be the kind of thing usually we would be able to see in real life, but we can't because we're all on Zoom. So feel free to say, I just did this thing, and then everyone will feel like they're all part of something together, which is lovely, and we are.
Right. Thanks so much, Jenny and Jay. And now we're going to have a bit of a conversation with Sylvie and Councillor Dominic Wy Kanak. Like, from where I sit, I see Greens councillors as the real faces of democracy. They provide their communities with opportunities and support to have a say in decisions, to get organized and to be loud. And they do cultivate so much hope and action. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about now, and how that translates into making the city of Sydney a city for everyone. So do we have Dom on the line?
I'm online.
Okay, hi.
I'm Mehreen.
Hey, how are you? So
Good.
Dom, what I'd like to probably ask you to do is just spend a few minutes talking to us about, as a councillor for Waverley Council, as well as a member of the Black Greens, talking about Greens working across councils to achieve change. How do we do that? And especially the role that you see local government playing in achieving justice for First Nations people.
Thank you, Mehreen, and congratulations, Sylvie. It's good to be online. I think it's an exciting launch. That video before was great, and seeing people putting in their suggestions about how we can improve the engagement process as Greens is great. I think one of the things that you mentioned before is the issue of affordable housing. And I'm glad to see that in the Greens policy for the City of Sydney Council that Sylvie is championing, is that there is a minimum 10% for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations housing in new housing projects. And that is the minimum. So as part of that journey towards reaching as an international city, the figure that Sylvie mentioned before about some London, I think it was, having 27%, it's good to see that the Greens are thinking about having a minimum 10% in there for First Nations housing. And when you think about the governance process that has changed in our country from the time of colonisation and invasion, when you think of those original models of governance that looked after people and looked after country, the closest to that model in the system that we now work with is a local council. So a local council replaces that usurped power that would have belonged to a council of elders in consultation with the community, and it now takes on that role. So including First Nations voices in that process of shared decision-making, and especially targeting one of those focuses towards participatory budgeting and having shared decision-making in that process for First Nations people in the city of Sydney, I think for me is one of the most exciting parts of the policies that Sylvie will champion into her role as City of Sydney Mayor and as our Greens candidate on a Greens Council for City of Sydney. I think the important place that Sydney plays in heritage is the role that local councils have in making people remember or helping them remember the truth of the history in all local council areas. And there's lots of both ancient and contemporary, and part of the self-determination process that happened in Sydney, the growth of our legal services, our medical services, these are important parts of our heritage. And organisations, community-controlled organisations that the City of Sydney is engaging with, and I know under Sylvie will increase that engagement, they hold an important place for us across the whole island and the islands associated with what we now call Australia in the modern politic of leading the street marches, copying the coppers' batons across your head or wherever, ending up with blood on the street, but all that process being the self-determination process of people asserting their voices, asserting the needs for community-controlled organisations, and doing that in what has now become our international city of Sydney. And that is where it all started. After 1770, when the boats came back, in 1788, we all know that that process started in Sydney. So the City of Sydney holds a very important place in bringing those things back to the issues and the levels that they were before invasion. When you think about it, before invasion, the people who lived on Sydney country, the Gadigal people, and the people who came there after invasion were used to having 100% housing, 100% employment. In the governance system prior to invasion, Everyone had a home. You were part of a mob. You had something to do. You were employed. You were contributing to a community. And that should be the situation that we restore ourselves to. And with the policies that Sylvie is championing is to bring traditional owners and controlled, community controlled organisations back into that process, and thereby, on a journey to treaty, make reparations in the process for the City of Sydney. And that should be what we look at for all our local government councils. The recent work of the Black Greens in changing the constitution of the Australian Greens to have a seat at the table for Black Nations, First Nations voices, I think is a very important step. And we can bring that to fruition by putting that missing gap that Jenny mentioned, and that gap that Mehreen works in with our federal compatriots, to make sure that that continuous link from community of First Nations, from community generally, to local council, to state representative, and on to a Commonwealth Parliament is strongly green. And I think the Greens are the leaders to take this country into the future. And Sylvie is our best candidate to do that for the City of Sydney. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Thanks so much, Dom. And thank you always for telling your truth so openly and courageously. Like, we all need to listen to this, and so many more in the community as well. Just want to encourage everyone to put questions in the chat for Sylvie and Dom, because I have a couple more questions, and then we'll open up for your questions as well. So I just want to, because Dom, you've spoken quite a bit and given some really good suggestions for how to, I guess, engage with communities much better than we do now. And obviously, being a very grassroots party in the New South Wales Greens, that idea of grassroots democracy we hold very dear and near to our hearts. So Sylvie, if I can ask you, I mean, I live in the City of Sydney, and I know that a lot of the consultation engagement is a bit of a tick box exercise still from the city. How do you think we can improve that more so that the city is really for everyone?
Thanks, Mehreen. I think I got to say, it's the thing when we were doing stalls and door knocking before lockdown that people raised with us the most was a frustration about that consultation model, and particularly the idea that often more and more it's expected that the consultation is going to be, you'll go to a website and you'll fill out a form. If you wanted to reach a real person and you were going to have a conversation about something, that you're not able to do that. There's a sense that, you know, town hall is a big beast, and that we're starting to lose some of what had been some really great work that the council used to do around engaging with people, that thinks about where people are at and how they need to be engaged with, and does it early on. There's a huge difference between working with people in the first place to say, this particular issue we want to solve, you are the expert in your own life, let's talk about how we're going to design it together. And then through the consultation process, and then at the end say, well, we're going to genuinely share power when we make these decisions. So some of the things we have included in the democracy policy that we'll be launching this week are around participatory budgeting, talking about how do you give local residents and community groups a stronger say directly over decisions over money. You don't just put the budget on display and say you can go to the website and you've got a couple of months to comment on it and then the council will make a decision, but actively work with people to demystify this very complicated billion-dollar beast so that they can link up real things with the things they want to change in their community. In particular, we think that if the council wants to make its paper commitment to self-determination and working in partnership with First Nations real, it should directly hand over control of the Indigenous budget that it has every year to local community controlled organisations and traditional owners to make those decisions. That's an example of something that is very straightforward. That can be done straight away. You obviously need to design the model of making sure who is in the room with communities in the first place. But it's about saying, we trust you to make those decisions because you are experts in your own lives. And I can tell you, you'll get a very different set of decisions about where council is spending its money around particular communities, which services it's going to spend it on, where it's going, than you do under the current model. That's just sort of one of the examples that we've got in our policy. Yeah.
I would be so proud, Sylvie, to have you representing me in the City of Sydney, and we have to make that happen, people. So I just one more question from me, and then we'll move to questions from others. You know, we often hear, and I think Sylvie, you alluded to that earlier, from people that local government should just deal with local issues and they have no place, you know, talking about bigger, wider issues, because the community really doesn't want that. They just want them to fix the road and the footpaths and waste and all of that. So what do you both say to that? Dom, maybe I'll go to you first. Why should local governments have a global role?
I think when we're looking at the situation of housing that was mentioned before for international cities like London, what happens in one international city, setting the precedent for what happens in Sydney as an international city, I think is a good link to show that the value of local councils working together in affordable housing is an international network of positive progress for Greens. But I think looking at any kind of measurement or performance of post-invasion democracies across the world gives us a chance to look at the city of Sydney being coincidentally the international city where that process of invasion started for our people, and to look at that as an example of what we can do in recognizing where we can make progress. I mean, having DJ in working in the edge of the city area when he was candidate for Wentworth, seeing Jamie and Jenny come along to a meeting where we focused on the returned veterans from Indigenous contexts that happened in Balmain that day we were on the election campaign. Those things, I think, show that how the assets that are looked after by local council can connect to a much broader and international agenda, especially for First Nations people. And as far as I'm concerned, adds to that First Nations progressiveness across the globe. Thank you.
Sylvie?
Yeah, it was that roads, rates and rubbish slur. It used to get thrown at us all the time on Marrickville Council, actually. It's an attempt to tell the Greens, you don't know how to do politics. You don't know what local council's about. And it's a thing that Conservatives do, basically to tell you that you're trying to muck up the system and do things differently. And that's just not how it's done, because they don't want the system to change. And for example, I mean, roads, rates and rubbish doesn't even mention one of the biggest things that council does, which is look after our parks and green spaces. Even for those councils that don't, like the city and like Marrickville had, which have, run childcare centres, run community centres, have huge community arts programs. So the idea that you would diminish what local council does down to those three things is not something that we should ever accept. It's not true about what council does now, and it's not what we want councils to do. But that bigger question you had, Mehreen, about the role beyond the local, I mean, local government is where the Greens started because it's the level of government that's closest to people in terms of the diversity of the different communities that we have. It means that it's the closest in terms of you being able to get access to an elected representative who can speak about the nuance of different issues and diversity of the community that you have, and to be able to implement some of those solutions that are diverse. And those solutions that are all levels. People don't live their lives at one particular level that, oh, I can't deal with that because it's a local government thing. Climate change is a local government issue. It's global, but it's a local government issue because it affects how all of the residents live, what their quality of life is going to be, because there's a responsibility for council to make sure that it's having carbon neutral operations, that's supporting residents to reduce their carbon footprint and how they live their lives. That framing of trying to say there is big issues and small issues, and this is for you to deal with, and this is not how we do politics here, is never something that we should accept, because it's about making people's voices smaller and telling us things can't change, which we know can change.
Absolutely. And having worked in 2 local councils, I cannot agree with you more that people don't see their local councils anymore as just the 3 Rs. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to the campaign co-conveners, Kath and Tristan, who are going to ask some of those questions that have been coming through. And I know we're fast running out of time, so we'll start with 2 questions and then see how we go. So Kath and Tristan, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. Look, there's been a real buzz about the housing package, and there's a couple of questions that have come through on that. Andrew Shooter asks, could the council run and retain the ownership of affordable housing rather than giving the land to community housing providers? I know that's something that Dom made reference to earlier. There's also been a couple of people have actually asked questions. Oh, where is it? Sorry, no, let's just go with that. Yep, thanks.
Technical model questions. Yes, so we got very excited when we were doing the modelling from the council papers. But so essentially the modelling that we've done is for council to be directly investing in housing. It includes housing it could build itself, and then it's making money from obviously the low rent that it is charging people, and affordable rent, as long as it was a model also that was sustainable and tenant led. Or it could be directly investing with, say, an artist co-op that wants to buy the building that they've been renting for a really long time. They just need a partner who's going to be in it with them for a long time that they can pay off, and that they know then they don't necessarily have to have the huge capital to in the first place. So our modelling is based on that sort of idea, that if the council could act as a sort of not-for-profit investor who just needed to get its money back, didn't need to make a massive profit, that would have some basic requirements about it needing to be genuinely affordable models you're investing in, genuinely tenant-led, properly sustainable and not bad for the environment. It might be helping students buy a series of, share houses that they live in and set up a form of cooperative. The modelling that we've done accommodates that and is based on basically a return of about $105 a week rent, or wouldn't be rent necessarily, it would be paying back the council. We've got more detail, but as one of our political economists is not here on the line to talk about it, but we're going to share some more info on the website. But yeah, that is the idea. It could be it'll work if it's council building its own. It works, I see in the chat, if it's a shared equity model, community land trust. We had a look at quite a lot of models. The bottom line, it's about the council using its money and investing it directly in the community and holding on to a stake until it gets paid back, and then investing it back again. That's the basic model. Not giving the land grants away, which are also important, but you can only do that once, right? You can only give your piece of public land away once for someone else to build on it. It doesn't stay on your books. This is about council doing something that's sustainable and also good for its budget.
Tristan, could I go to you to ask the next question?
Yeah, so this is from Luke, and he's asked about the business and property investors having an outside say in the City of Sydney with non-residential voting. I suppose, what are we going to do about that first? And how will that impact our ability to create affordable housing and do all those things we want to do when they have such an outsized say?
Yeah, I was at a community forum online, sadly, but a community forum this week that Friends of Erskineville were doing about the two votes for business, one vote for residents, that only exists in the Liberals brought in here and in Melbourne to try and cut down the resident voice to make it a more conservative council. Look, it is one of the reasons that the Greens have found it harder last time to get elected back on council. That said, there was only 500 votes in it. We only need a little push to make sure we've got Greens back on City of Sydney Council, but ultimately we do need the law to change. And that means it's one of the things I'm excited about is the way that, and we having Greens in the federal parliament, in the state parliament and local council, when the law needs to change at a different level, that we can campaign together and mobilise people to do that. Ultimately, that's what we need to do. It does mean the council's more conservative than it should be, but it doesn't mean that you wouldn't still get the numbers to do something that was a really smart idea. That's how if anything, the current Clover Moore team has always been very good at picking up Greens ideas that it's liked and adopting them and taking them as their own. It's one of the things that used to drive the old Greens on council bonkers. But, it's an important part about how the Greens set the agenda, even when we're in minority.
Yeah, it's the same frustration, Sylvie, at the state and federal level with Labor, but you're right, you've got to look at the bigger picture. I am also timekeeper, so I'm going to keep to time and we'll move on to the closing part of this session. Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you, Sylvie. And you heard from Sylvie, only 500 votes, people. So we need people power, but we do also need your donations. So please, if you can, as little as you can, donate to Sylvie's campaign, because we need Sylvie to be there in the city of Sydney, and we need her to be mayor as well. So I'll hand back to Jay to close for us.
Great. Thank you, Mehreen, and thank you to everybody who attended today. Now, I just want to do some quick thank yous. So there's people who you haven't seen who have been helping out and who are integral to ensure that today went ahead. So I wanted to say thank you to Andrew Blake, who's been on the Zoom, who's been switching back and forth between the spotlights and who got that video up flawlessly. So thank you so much. And also to Kristen O'Connell and Jesse Kemp, who have been keeping an eye on the social media and trying to work out the kinks when they come up and smooth that out. So again, thank you so much to those who helped out that were not present, but they're there making sure that it went off. And of course, you heard from our co-conveners for the council, Kath Turner and Tristan Ryan. Thanks so much. And formally, thank you to the presenters today. So thank you, Mehreen. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Dom. And most importantly, thank you, Sylvie, as the lead candidate. And thank you, DJ, as well as the support and second on our ticket. So again, we need you to be able to get this campaign off the ground. We're in some difficult times, but that doesn't mean that we can't get this done. It's only 500 votes, and that's 500 votes that we can get through, whether it's social media, as we saw in the poll today, or whether it's donations, small or large, in order to get those flyers into letterboxes and hell, even QR codes where we can get how to votes on posters, on the walls, if we cannot get people out there at the voting booth. So again, if you can, please take the time to keep an eye on our social media and to like, to share, and to have those meaningful conversations with your friends and family in the Sydney community. Obviously, you can't do that face-to-face, but you can find other ways through social media, through Zoom events, like you can organize, hell, we could do like a quiz night, trivia, for example, where we can engage anyone to come in. And we'll be also holding events, so stay tuned to the social media sites where you'll be able to see that. But also, again, please send me an email at sydney.council@newsouthwalesgreens.org.au. There, just say hey and just let me know where and how you want to be involved, and I'll make sure that you can fit in. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. We had 83 people come at its peak, and it balanced out around 75. That's absolutely massive. So thank you to everyone who turned out, from the people in Sydney and to any other Greens and their supporters around the country. So again, thank you. Get on our socials. And just to finally wrap up, if you want to stick around, we're going to take about a 10-minute break and we're going to get a bit informal. So if you've got a drink, go grab a drink and we can come back and decompress, and you can have a chat to Sylvie. And if any of the other MPs want to stick around to answer any questions, they're more than welcome to as well. So again, a big thank you to everyone who came today, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon in some form or another. Thank you.